When Sukuna finally leaves Yuji's body and steals Megumi's, the first thing that he does is just petty. Yuji instantly realizes that Megumi has been taken over and calls out to his friend, but Sukuna just smiles back and rushes forth, slamming Yuji with a powerful punch right to the gut that sends Yuji flying off the roof through a nearby building and onto an apartment building roof a mile away. After surviving an attack from another sorcerer, Sukuna looks off the roof of the skyscraper that he's on and realizes that Yuji, even without him, has somehow jumped onto a nearby building, and as he thinks for a second, Yuji jumps again, destroying the roof that he was on with the power of his leap, as Yuji catches Sukuna off guard, grabbing him by the neck and falling off of the other side of the building screaming his name. As the two land and Sukuna tries to use his dismantle on Yuji, but Megumi's soul weakens him, allowing Yuji to walk through Sukuna's technique and land a solid blow. Over the course of the entire Jujutsu Kaisen anime and manga, Yuji Itadori has pretty much had no power of his own. He was able to use Divergent Fist, which is sort of just like using raw curse energy to punch things, and that allowed him to use Black Flash a little more frequently than a normal person. However, he's finally awakened his new ability. But Gege did his best to keep it hidden somewhat for now. However, here's what we know. In Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 222, we saw everyone getting ready for the final battle, with it already being explained to us that Yuji's body has become a sort of cursed object or tool, allowing him to pretty much eat any other cursed object or tool to potentially gain its powers. We know that Yuji ate the remains of his brothers that Choso retrieved for him, meaning he likely has access to any cursed energy that they would have had, but in chapter 222, we see somehow that Yuji switched bodies of Kusakabe, who trains him to get it under control, showing us that Yuji's cursed technique seems to be body switching, just like his mom, Kenjaku. In season 1 of Jujutsu Kaisen, Todo thinks that he's Yuji's brother, but this isn't the only time that this happens. During the Shibuya incident arc in JJK, Yuji comes across a curse named Choso, who we've already seen in the first season. And as Yuji and this mysterious curse are fighting, having an amazing battle that'll probably be a highlight of season 2, we see a similar scene when Choso suddenly has a memory of the past that never happened, when he sees Yuji at a friendly picnic between him and his other brothers, who Yuji and Nobara already killed in season 1. This is because Yuji Itadori isn't a normal human being, and he's actually the result of a long plan created by an evil sorcerer in the past named Kenjaku, who for some reason created 9 different crosses between a human and a curse. And after realizing that he can sense Yuji much like he can sense his other brothers, Choso, one of the half curses, realizes that Yuji himself is just like him, and that means that Yuji is Choso's little brother. I know this title seems crazy, but it's not a theory, and here's why. Yuji's family history is really complicated, with me always wondering why it felt like his grandpa knew way too much, but in a flashback in the JJK manga, we see more about the family, as Gramps tells Yuji's dad that he needs to stay away from that woman, with that woman being Yuji's mom, because she's bad news. And whether or not Gramps knew it, he was exactly right, because at this time, Yuji's mom isn't the woman that his father likely fell in love with, and in actuality, her body was taken over by a sorcerer named Kenjaku, who needed to create Yuji for his plans in the future, and was known as the most evil sorcerer in history. This same sorcerer is the one responsible for taking over Geto's body after Jujutsu Kaisen 0, meaning that Kenjaku, the final villain of Jujutsu Kaisen besides Sukuna, is actually Yuji's mom and even has access to her extremely powerful curse technique. In Jujutsu Kaisen, like in My Hero Academia, there's actually a traitor that we've already met in the first season. And in season 2, we'll be watching as Kokichi Muta, also known as Mekamaru, finally has to face his betrayal by having an amazing battle with Mahito after we learn that Mekamaru has been spying on the sorcerers and feeding all sorts of information to the curses in exchange for a binding vow of Mahito that will force Mahito to use his ability to heal Kokichi's body, which is completely unusable because of his heavenly restriction, which is like a curse that limits the body in one way to make it far more capable in other ways. Because of this, Kokichi's skin can't even survive being in the moonlight, being extremely delicate, but after completing his job as a traitor, Mahito does follow through of completely healing his body and making it normal, leading to a battle between the two and Mekamaru's giant battle mech, as Kokichi tries to take the curses down to make up for everything he's done until now. everyone says that Gojo is untouchable, but there's one character in JJK who does stand a chance, and that's Toji Fushiguro, who we'll be meeting in Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2. The mystery of who Megumi's dad is and why exactly he abandoned his son will finally be revealed as we get a closer look at the character and his motivations. Toji Fushiguro takes a job that puts him right in Gojo's way, and instead of folding to the world's strongest, Toji sees this as a challenge and actually thinks of a strategy that could really kill Gojo if it happens as it's supposed to. If you think Maki is cool, then look out for this character who takes everything she can do to the next level with his amazing speed, intellect, power, and cursed tools and weapons that he makes use of all together to terrorize our students over the course of the Hidden Inventory arc, which is named that because Toji himself carries around a cursed spirit that he tamed to carry his weapons for him, which is even better when you realize he isn't supposed to be able to see curses due to having zero cursed energy at all. The latest chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen starts with Gojo and Sukuna squaring off after the Hollow Purple from last week, as Sukuna replies to Gojo's comment about him being the challenger. Sukuna tells Gojo that he's a fish on the cutting board. He's just bigger than everyone else. So first Sukuna is gonna strip his scales away, likely referring to Gojo's infinity, which Sukuna plans to overcome. As the two close in on each other, we're treated to an amazing hand-to-hand battle, with Gojo using his infinity and new physique to push Sukuna around and apply loads of pressure, until he destroys a bridge and sends Sukuna flying into a building. However, at that moment, Sukuna slices the building in half, dropping it on himself and Gojo, as the two fight through the collapsing building, walking out of the wreckage side by side, almost as a show of respect for each other, with the two of them actually joking around that after this is all said and done, the other is gonna have to take the blame for all the damage that they're causing. The final battle between Gojo and Sukuna has finally started, with Gojo landing the first blow. At the start of the latest JJK chapter, we see Gojo standing on a roof in Shibuya as he prepares to use his curse technique, getting buffed by Utahime, who uses a dance to increase his curse energy output. On the other side of the city, we see Sukuna and Uraume sensing Gojo's curse energy in the distance, and as Sukuna thinks about heading straight there, we see every building or structure between Gojo and Sukuna turning to dust as a massive wave of curse energy heads towards Sukuna, with Gojo calling out 200% purple, making this twice as strong as the attack we saw used on Hanami in Season 1. Sukuna actually gets intimidated seeing this attack and tries to block it. However, at the end of the chapter, we can see that Gojo actually managed to blow one of Sukuna's arms off, but I'm sort of worried it didn't do more. Yuji Itadori is free from Sukuna, but there's a huge price to pay. During the Culling Games arc in Jujutsu Kaisen, Sukuna stays quiet for a majority of the arc after all the carnage that he created during the previous Shibuya incident arc. However, once Sukuna makes his appearance, he changes everything as he takes over Yuji's body using the Enchain keyword that he planted into Yuji's mind in Season 1, placing all of his cursed energy into one of his fingers and force-feeding it to Megumi, who then becomes the new host of the King of Curses. And this is bad, because this means that not only does Sukuna have all of Megumi's broken abilities, but he also has access to everything that Megumi could potentially do once he became a master sorcerer. And if you recall, the 10 Shadows technique is the one ability we know of that can apparently beat a limitless 6 Eyes user like Gojo, setting up the final battle between the two characters who claim to be the strongest. After Sukuna steals Megumi's body in Jujutsu Kaisen, he not only has access to his own shrine ability, but he also has access to Megumi's 10 Shadows technique. And Sukuna shows us how a master really uses his power by enhancing every summon with his curse energy to amplify the ability to new heights. First, by not giving the dog a physical form, Sukuna is able to create a shadow dog swarm to hunt his enemies down with their strikes, while also being able to fuse them together into a giant powerful dog with incredible speed and strength. Sukuna also shows off 2 Shikigami that Megumi never used before, which are the Round Deer, which is a large beast that heals him and cancels enemy abilities with reverse curse technique, and the Piercing Ox, which is a Shikigami capable of pushing back anyone that gets in the way of its charge. If this isn't enough though, Sukuna also summons a giant version of Megumi's Nue that calls in massive lightning strikes. Sukuna finally stops sitting on the sidelines in the Shibuya arc. Jogo and Geto's assistants find Yuji and does the one thing that we've been warned shouldn't be done when they feed Yuji 10 Sukuna fingers all at once after Yuji had only eaten 5 up until that point of the series. And because of this, Sukuna is able to overwhelm Yuji's mind and take over his body for an extended period of time. And the second that he realizes that Yuji can't take control back from him, he goes on an absolute rampage, first fighting Jogo as they drop meteors on Japan, and then going after Megumi, who summons his strongest Shikigami to try and put Sukuna down. But in response, the King of Curses activates his Domain Expansion Malevolent Shrine, which slices and cleaves anyone within its open area with an infinite waves of attacks that shreds them down to nothing, only switching back to Yuji afterwards to show Yuji all the amazing destruction that he caused while Sukuna was in control. We've talked about the heights of some of the sorcerers, so here are the curses. First off, matching Yuji Itadori, we have Sukuna's official height, which is 5'8", but we've seen that Sukuna's original form was a large tank of a man, so this will likely change if he ever reverts to his original appearance. On the shorter end of curses, we have Jogo, who stands at a height of 4'7", with his closest ally, Hanami, actually being on the opposite end of the height chart at 7'2". Yuji's brother Choso was a little taller than Yuji at 6 feet even, which makes him only a bit taller than Mahito, who stands at 5'10.5". But then you have Dagon, who at first is only a little taller than Jogo at 5 foot even, but eventually Dagon evolves into his true form, which makes him a bit taller than 6 feet tall, just like the leader of all of these curses, Kenjaku himself, who stands at 6'3" in Suguru Geto's body. So far, a number of Kenjaku's cursed spirits have been references to other anime or manga that heavily influence the author, but none made me happier or more creeped out than his Uzumaki. Uzumaki, for those who don't know, has nothing to do with Naruto, and it's actually a manga by legendary horror author Junji Ito, surrounding a town that begins to go mad as its residents focus more and more on strange spiral occurrences happening in the town. In the first chapter, Kiri, the main character, notices that her father's pottery has had a ton of strange spiral designs in it lately, and as her father devolves further and further into madness, becoming obsessed over the spirals, he buys a large wooden tub, and somehow they find him forced into it with all of his bones shattered in the shape of, you guessed it, a spiral. In Jujutsu Kaisen, Kenjaku's Uzumaki takes the exact shape of this horrific scene from the manga, although the one key difference is that Kenjaku's Uzumaki is actually made up of Mahito, who Kenjaku absorbed during the Shibuya arc. When Gojo enters Shibuya to defeat the curses and save everyone, he finally gets a rematch against Jogo and Hanami, who he battled in Season 1. As they stand on the rails of a train platform, Jogo, Hanami, and Choso start blasting through civilians trying to get away who were trapped, and as they use the civilians as a deterrent to Gojo using his domain and to try to block off his infinity, the two cursed spirits attack Gojo using a technique called Domain Amplification, which allows him to neutralize an opponent's cursed technique with the trade-off that they can't use their own innate techniques. When Gojo taunts Hanami saying he's going to be the first to go, he instead goes after Jogo while turning his Limitless off, which baits Hanami into turning off Domain Amplification, allowing Gojo to rush him down and rip out his 2 core roots, before Gojo powers up and overwhelms Hanami as he's pressed against a wall under the full weight of infinity, and crushed until he's exorcised, with Gojo turning to Jogo, saying only one thing: next. We found out that most of Demon Slayer's cast is actually really short, but what about Jujutsu Kaisen? Yuji Itadori, our main character, stands at the same height as Muzan at 5'8". That makes him just a little shorter than Megumi Fushiguro, who stands at 5'9". Their best friend, who they'll never be without, Nobara, is rather short, standing at 5'3", which makes her smaller than I thought, but that's probably because of her big personality. Yuji's upperclassmen at Jujutsu Tech are also shorter than I thought, with Maki and Mai both coming in at 5'7", and Inumaki being a small guy at 5'5". But that's okay, because evening out their height is Panda, who stands at a massive 6'7". But there are humans taller than 6 feet in the group, with Nanami being 6 feet tall himself, and Aoi Todo as well as Satoru Gojo both coming in at 6'3". Drop the centimeter translation in the comments and get pinned. In Jujutsu Kaisen, there's a character who seems to be a straight up Joker movie reference with a bit of a wacky spin, and that would be Takaba. This guy looks like an idiot and definitely is, but somehow during the Culling Games arc, Takaba awakens what is probably one of the most broken curse techniques we've ever seen in the series, with the narrator even telling us it could rival Gojo himself. Here's why. Takaba was a failed comedian who awakened a curse technique which itself is called comedian, allowing Takaba to more or less do anything if he himself thinks that it would be funny. And paired with his one brain cell, this makes for a character who makes attacks just bounce off of him and ignores all damage because it wouldn't be funny to actually get hurt. And despite Gojo's infinity being a big deal, if Takaba thought it would be funny to hit Gojo and completely ignore it, well, he'd be able to, making me really wonder what would happen when you take this gag character with a broken ability and make him fight Mr. Serious himself, Sukuna. During the Culling game arcs in the Jujutsu Kaisen manga, we see a large battle royale taking place in different areas of Japan, and Yuji finally goes on trial for his crimes. As Yuji tries to get enough points to add a new rule to the game, he comes across a new sorcerer named Higuruma, who quickly became one of my favorite characters in the entire arc. Higuruma was a hard-working lawyer who awakened his curse technique during a trial that didn't go his way, and he's extremely proficient with curse energy to the point where he even learned how to use domain expansion really quickly. Higuruma's domain expansion places him and the target in a courtroom where they have 3 chances to complete a trial based off different crimes that they've committed, and during their battle, Yuji is brought to trial for Sukuna's crimes of taking out an entire area of Japan and everyone in it, and even though it means that he'll lose the fight, Yuji confesses to Sukuna's crimes, allowing Higuruma to summon his executioner's blade, which can kill anyone found guilty with one touch. Megumi Fushiguro was abandoned by his father due to the events of Gojo's hidden inventory arc. However, in the Shibuya arc, we see Megumi reuniting with his father for the first time. As Megumi and his other family members work together to take down Dagon, the cursed ocean spirit from the first season, outside we see a pair of sorcerers activating a technique called Cursed Seance. And this allows the user to use her grandson's body as the host for a spirit that is already passed on. However, when she does this and tries to momentarily bring back Toji as her puppet, he swiftly breaks free from the technique, gaining complete control over himself, and was basically brought back to life. From there, Toji goes on to find Megumi, and the two have a short fight. However, during the battle, while Megumi is fighting his father without realizing it, Toji hears Megumi's name and asks him what his name is. And when Megumi answers Fushiguro, Toji takes his spear and shoves it in his own head, knowing that Gojo's promise to him was kept and he's not needed anymore, leaving Megumi extremely confused at just who that was that he fought. Gojo is the strongest sorcerer in all of Jujutsu Kaisen, but fans expecting him to be even stronger this season are gonna have to wait. During season 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen, for the first half of the season, we'll be focusing on the hidden inventory arc, which revolves around Gojo and Geto when the two were still just students at Jujutsu High, as the two went on a mission that had plenty of twists and turns and eventually ended in the two becoming enemies like we see in the modern day. But since Gojo is younger in this arc, he doesn't actually have a perfect understanding of his ability yet, meaning it's possible for Gojo to be hit and actually have to struggle in battle in this season, which should lead to some really intense matches between him and the big villain of this first section of the season as he pieces together the ins and outs of the 6 eyes and his limitless abilities. Kenjaku has a bunch of cursed spirits under his control, but one of them is actually the spirit of the 9-tailed fox. In Jujutsu Kaisen 0, we see Kenjaku summoning the special grade imaginary cursed spirit Tamamo no Mae. And for Westerners like me, this may just seem like some scary evil lady, but Tamamo no Mae is actually a special figure from Japanese folklore who allegedly lived during the Heian era as a court attendant at the Imperial Palace, where her beauty captivated everyone around her. So it's likely that, sort of like Sukuna, the cursed spirit is an echo of a person who actually lived in the JJK world. Underneath her beauty, Tamamo was apparently extremely evil as she manipulated others into creating chaos using her fox spirit powers. And when she was banished from the palace, a series of natural disasters and tragedies befell Japan due to her wrath, which shows just how powerful this spirit is, despite it being just one of Kenjaku's spirits that also serves as a reference to another manga. Megumi's 10 shadows gives him his divine dogs, which were originally a pair but have now fused into one. Then we have Nue, the large owl, who Megumi summons to paralyze his enemies with its electric wings. Megumi's great serpent is meant to strike quickly from the ground for a surprise attack, while his cursed toad is meant to lock opponents down with his grasping tongue attacks. Rabbit escape is a technique that summons an infinitely multiplying swarm of rabbits that overwhelms the opponent's vision to help Megumi get away. And Max Elephant is a large elephant that shoots large amounts of water from its tusk, and it can even be dropped on enemies. Lastly, we have Maharaga, a Shikigami that no one has ever been able to capture because of its ability to learn and adapt to any attacks. But despite this being the last summon that that Megumi can release, Sukuna in Megumi's body has even more at his disposal. Satoru Gojo is back, and it's finally time for him to fight Sukuna in the final battle of Jujutsu Kaisen's manga. Or is it? With Gojo's return and 1 month worth of time going by in the story, it seems like everyone has a really relaxed attitude now that their teacher is back, as they expect for him to win against Sukuna in their fight and don't really see the possibility of him losing. The scary thing though is we jump right from the end of last chapter to Gojo and Sukuna in their last moments before their battle, but we know that Yuji and the others aren't about to just sit there until the manga is over, so with Kenjaku planning on wiping out all of the other players in the Culling games, using Sukuna as a distraction, is it possible that Gege is giving us all a false sense of security, and Sukuna, who actually has eaten all 20 of his fingers but one, actually stands a chance at being the strongest? Yuji Itadori's mom is a mysterious character in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, especially because it seems like she was part of the Jujutsu world. We don't know much about Yuji's family like his father and mother, with us only getting a few moments to spend with his grandpa in the first episode. However, in the manga after, we find out that Yuji's mom is actually the previous body of an evil sorcerer named Kenjaku. In his next fight, we're able to learn that not only was Yuji's mom capable of using curse energy, but she also had a curse technique, which was called anti-gravity system. This ability hasn't been explained too deeply, but it's a curse technique that repels forces of gravity, with Kenjaku being able to use reverse curse technique to actually create the effect of gravity, making this an insanely powerful ability depending on the user's curse energy output. But the question now is just who was Yuji's mom before her body was taken over, and why did she have such an overpowered ability? Maki finally goes home after Megumi is made the head of the Zenin clan in the wake of the Shibuya arc. However, things don't go according to plan, leading to an outright massacre at the Zenin compound. When Maki visits, she's still recovering from her injuries she sustained in a fight against Jogo that left her covered in burns, and she's there for the armory of cursed tools and weapons the family has been keeping for generations that she now has permission to take from the clan head Megumi. But no one there accepts Maki, and her own father, who already had Mai on death's door, attempts to execute her. As a last-ditch effort, Mai uses all of her remaining energy to create an extremely powerful sword for her sister, taking the last of Maki's cursed energy with her, truly putting her sister in a similar realm to Toji himself, as Maki cuts through the entire Zenin clan, including her father, ending all of them for attempting to cut her down, and as revenge for her sister.